So for 99.9% of my high school career, I had the perfect excuse to not study hard, not do my homework, and not care that I was in the bottom um, 10 performers of my class. I went to a small school. I think my final report card said that I was the 36th ranked kid out of 44. And I had the perfect excuse in my own mind that I was going to go and play college basketball, and it wasn't going to matter about my grades because any team would be so honored to have me. I was completely and utterly wrong. I mean, I couldn't have been even more wrong than that excuse. And it was an excuse because it made me feel comfortable about slacking off. But when reality came and I didn't receive one phone call from any college basketball coach at any level, rightfully so, I wasn't good enough to make it to college. When I came smacked face with that reality, it literally brought me to tears. And I remember the moment that I realized that I wasn't going to become a basketball player or a college basketball player. It was so debilitating because I had leaned on that as a crutch as to why I wasn't going to work hard in other aspects of my life. And that perfect excuse, that crutch that I had for myself, had been kicked out from underneath me. And I had like 6 months to correct it, which was virtually impossible. I didn't have time to get my grades up to put me in a position to get a scholarship to college, although I could have gotten scholarships through, I don't know, I mean, the most ridiculous types of scholarships that are low-hanging fruit out there. I was just too lazy to look into them. But nonetheless, without having this excuse and without having the identity of being a basketball player, my next steps were just to work as hard as I possibly could so that way I could never look at any of my mishaps and blame them for excuses ever again. So I dedicated myself with the last 6 months of my high school career to taking ownership and not making excuses. And it was a long road for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years after that. A lot of sleeping in, a lot of mistakes, a lot of I'll do it tomorrow. But ultimately, I went through a few experiences that showed me the power of the mind. Because when I had no options coming out of high school, an option that I did have was to go work for my aunt. And I know that she had mentioned it to me probably like a few months back. It was going into my high school, or to my senior year of high school. She had mentioned it kind of like as a joke that I could come work for her. But I always kept that in my mind. And looking back, looking back on it, I wasn't proactive on taking her up on that offer. But I remember just when I realized that I wasn't going to become a college basketball player, I realized that was my best opportunity, was to get into business of some sort. And when I graduated, I was a stock boy, I was a bus boy, and I also worked at a factory. And that last job, working at a factory, I had to clock in at like 5:45 a.m. and I had to work 6 days a week. It was strange. It was like the first time in my life where I had to have a minimum amount of like 40 hours a week. And I had started that job about a week before I think it was like my 19th birthday. And um, the day that I did have off was on my birthday, and I slept in that day. And I remember sleeping in, and the sun was shining. It was bright out, which means it was probably like around 11:30. And um, the phone was ringing, and I didn't want to pick it up because I was just lazy or whatever. And then I realized that I had a voicemail on my phone, and it was from my aunt. And I thought that she was just going to wish me happy birthday. So I went to delete it, but something just made me want to see what she had to say. And to my surprise, she did not wish me happy birthday at all. It wasn't a happy birthday call in the slightest. She called me to talk about potentially coming to work for her. And I remember up until that point, I had spent the past 6 months of just thinking about working for my aunt, thinking about being able to wear a dress shirt to work instead of just a t-shirt. And it was so important to me, and it was just like the stars had aligned, and I knew that I had to go take that opportunity. So I next day I set up an interview, if you will, with my aunt, and was able to take the job. And I thankfully got out of the factory job. It was for an aluminum company. It was just tedious work. But then once I was working for my aunt, once I was in the office, I was learning so much, learning how to deal with customer service. My first foray into sales, cold call, being hung up on over and over and over again for 6 months. In all the meantime, I just kept thinking of the future, kept thinking of being able to learn more and grow and contribute. And I started going to YSU at the time, and this was right when downtown Youngstown, Ohio, was starting to come back to life. And I remember wandering downtown, even though I lived in Youngstown my whole life. Growing up as a kid, Youngstown, the downtown scene was dead. But it started to come back to life when I started college and started selling insurance. And I remember going down there and kind of just like peeking into these restaurants and into these stores and meeting people and feeling more comfortable down there. And I spent about a year and a half just thinking about how great it would be to work downtown, to be in an office downtown. And I never brought it up to my aunt. And lo and behold, like 2 years later, she wanted to open up an office downtown, and that's where she wanted me to work out of. So believe it or not, it was a dream come true for me at the time. And I had never brought it up to my aunt, but it was like it was constantly in my mind, just thinking of one day being able to work down there. And then when I got down there, even though the first office was so lovely, there was another building across the street that was the tallest building downtown. And I just kept thinking, oh, well, this is great, but how cool would it be to work in the tallest building in town? And just like, oh man, this would be so awesome. And I just kept thinking about it. And I just kept thinking how impossible it would be to because it was impossible for me to see myself downtown at all, but then to move across the street just because it was the biggest building didn't make sense. And then lo and behold, about a year later, my aunt made the move to that building, to that same building that I had thought about every day, walking past it to go to the first office that was downtown. So it was like another unbelievable situation where something impossible had come into reality. And then towards graduating college, I became more and more interested in marketing, and I knew that that's where I wanted to take my career. And I had a friend who was at a marketing agency in Cleveland. It was in a suburb of Cleveland. And I somehow talked my way into getting a tour of the office. And I remember driving up there, taking the tour, and was just so impressed with the culture and the vibe there that when I walked out, I told myself that in a year I was going to work for that company. I only knew two people at the company, or I would say I only knew one person at that time. And I walked out of that agency and I followed everyone that I could, who I knew worked at that agency. And I just spent the next, it was like 12 to 8 months just reaching out to these people on Twitter and being genuine and being honest and trying to connect with them and trying to build a relationship. And eventually I had worked up the nerve to ask my friend if they were hiring at all. And he asked me if I had graduated college, and I told him no. And he said, well, then call me back when you graduate. So I tucked that in the back of my mind. And in between that time that I had called him and got rejected kind of the first time, and between that time and when I graduated, this was 2016. The Cleveland Cavaliers were, I think this was like their second back-to-back appearance finals. And I remember my friend and I, or a group of my friends, we would go down to downtown Cleveland to the watch parties for every game of the playoffs. And I remember just keep going back to downtown Cleveland. And on the way driving to Cleveland, I kept thinking about that agency, and I kept thinking, this is where I'm going to work. And I remember going downtown and being outside of the queue and thinking, I'm gonna work here one day. And I always thought to myself, well, this is weird. I mean, like, how can you work downtown if you're going to work for this agency that's in the suburbs? But either way, I just kept telling myself, this is where I'm going to work. This is where I'm going to work while I was downtown. And, of course, the Cavaliers made history by doing the impossible and being the first team to come back in a final series down 3-1, beating the most winningest regular season team of all time in the Golden State Warriors. So they did something impossible. And then on my birthday, it's like 4 or 5 years after I had got the call from my aunt, on my birthday, I got a text from my friend after the Cavs had won that said that a Fortune 500 company was a client of theirs, and they had contracted work out to this company, and they're in downtown Cleveland, and he thinks I should apply for it. So I applied for it. I got hired for the job, and I was technically an employee of this marketing agency, but I never worked in their office because they contracted me out to this Fortune 500 company, which was in downtown Cleveland. So I eventually wound up doing exactly what I had in my mind for 6 to 8 months of working for this company, but working for them while I was downtown. And there's just examples upon examples upon examples in my life of times where I've just thought very deeply and focused very intently on something in the future that didn't seem like it could happen, but it was something that I felt like was the right direction, and it ended up becoming reality. Now, this is not to say that I'm some wizard or some sorcerer that can manifest the future or manipulate reality, because I can't. In fact, I believe that I don't have the capacity to understand reality as it is in reality outside of my mind. I think the universe, I think the world, I think life is too complex and too complicated. And that's why our brains are able to recognize patterns and develop themes and create shortcuts to the way we perceive um, how we perceive life, and that perception of the changes in our life is how we deem life to be and deem reality itself to be. So I say all this to say that, there's been situations that I gave some examples of positive affirmations, if you will, and visualizations that positive experiences that have manifested themselves in my life. But there's also been situations where I've manifested bad situations as well. And again, this is not to say that I'm manipulating reality. I'm just realizing that there's a pattern of putting these filters on the way I perceive reality and the way I perceive life itself. And even with those positive attributions that have come to life for me, it wasn't as merely as me just thinking of them and waiting, as much as I had these thoughts and these ideas in my mind, and they were so consuming that it actually dictated my subconscious behavior to put into actions and to put into motion different behaviors for myself that would better position me to actually being able to experience those opportunities as a result. So I don't want this to be mistaken as me saying that, I can dictate reality. The message of this podcast really is this idea of like what is bouncing around inside our minds eventually leaks out into how we perceive the outside world. And I've experienced in my life that this is the case for better or worse. So being able to guard your mind and being able to filter through the things that that are negative, you could be manifesting that and producing that energy and making your subconscious build upon itself to the point where your actions and behavior put you in a less than ideal situation. But the same thing goes for the positive end of life. And I don't want it to limit only to if you think about making $1 million, you'll make $1 million. That hasn't been the case for me. But it's more so of looking at what do you want to see your environment. Like, what is that environment that you envision that would better position you in the ones that you care about? And being able to wholly and fully dive deep into that mindset as much as you can. So that way you start acting in a way where it starts bringing little by little different shifts and different changes that lead to that environment. And along the way, potentially giving you surprises that you would have never imagined or thought to be possible before. So with that, thank you for listening. I hope you're thinking positively and about positive change and about positive contributions that you can make not only to your own life, but to the lives of those around you, and the way that you perceive life itself. So with that, thank you again. I hope you have a great week. Stay well, stay healthy, and much love. Thanks.